Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man podcast. My name's Rory Paquette. I know you know that. I just like to remind myself, to be honest with you, especially on a day like today, exactly how grateful I am to be sitting in this chair, folks. If it's not for you out there doing everything that you're doing, liking, sharing, keeping us going, then I don't get to sit here and do what I'm doing. When we made the move to 7 days a week, it really blew things up for us because of you. You folks responded, and our episodes on the weekends have become fantastic because of you. And the show continues to move on. And as I've promised before, we're going to continue to bring on these powerful and interesting men to have these discussions with you and make sure I give you something worth listening to. I'm pretty sure we're doing that today. So you're going to love this one. Folks, if you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, then you know what time it is. That's right. Got to take a sip of our preferred beverage. Here we go. Oh man, that stuff is fantastic. You know what it is we're drinking? That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee. On Instagram, look them up, check them out. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. They brew a mean bean. It's a fantastic cup of joe, and they do all the right things for all the right reasons, including supporting veterans. Folks, you know how important veterans are to us here at the Power Man Podcast. If you're a veteran, I want to thank you and your family for your sacrifice and for allowing us to have these conversations that we have. It's because of you that we get to do that. We love you, and we're glad that you found a home here at the Power Man Podcast. And you know who else loves you? Freedom Hill Coffee, and that's why they do what they do. At Freedom Hill Coffee, check them out on Instagram. Folks, let's get rolling. I'm going to take one more sip of this, and you can tell them that Power Man sent you. All right? One more sip so I can keep up with this young buck on the other side of the table from me. And there we go. All right, folks, this gentleman has so many facets to him. I'm not even sure if I could list all of his talents, but I'm going to try, and we're going to get them all together here. Please welcome to the show. He's an engineer, a painter. He's a writer. He's a poet. He is a speaker on occasion. And, today he's also the author of the new book, Encounter. It's a true story about surviving disaster, embracing cultural shock, finding meaning when control disappears. Frankly, folks, it's a gripping story with drawing that draws from life lessons. I cannot wait to have him tell you all about this and the story behind it. Please welcome to the show, Ian Reilly. Ian, how you doing, brother?
I'm good, thanks. Great to be here.
All right. Thank you for coming on today. Looking forward to hearing the story. Looking forward to hearing more about the book. Tell everybody, who is Ian Reilly? Where'd you come from? What are you about? What's your story, brother?
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm 63. I was born in Australia, in Queensland, and grew up in another state on a small sheep and cattle farm. In the country, went to university in Melbourne, where I still live. Studied engineering. I did mechanical engineering. Out of that, I went out into the world. My first job was with the Australian Army. I wasn't a soldier, I was a civilian, but we were designing heavy equipment and small arms and ammunition. I worked with special forces and then at the end of that, I went overseas for 2 years as an international volunteer with my wife, Heather. So we went to Samoa. It was then called Western Samoa, different from American Samoa, but right next door. Same people, same language. And the book Encounter that I've written is really about the first 3 to 4 months of that experience. And there will be subsequent books covering the rest of the story there. Subsequent to that, though, I went into international consulting as an innovation consultant. And I spent a lot of time working with companies in the US, Europe, and Japan. Some companies you may know include the pharmaceutical company located in Atlanta called the Coca-Cola Company. You've probably heard of that one.
I've heard of that one.
General Electric is another client. Uh, there's a few others in the US, in the Europe that are probably more well known in the medical industry. But I spent a lot of time developing what we would call world first products. So we were called in to design a product that no one had done before or to solve a particular problem. So I spent a lot of time doing that, about 15 years, and then I launched my own startup company. It was a tech startup in agriculture called Agersens, We created the world's first virtual fence for cattle. And then we hit COVID. You might remember that episode.
A little
Caused a
bit.
lot of consternation around the world, including in Australia. And we were desperate for toilet paper as well as you guys were. Uh, at the end of that, our largest investor offered to buy the company, and so I bowed out. But that enabled me to retire and not to worry about working again for a living. And that meant that I could go back to focusing on writing the story of Encounter, which I always wanted to write. So the first 2 years of our time in Samoa, we had never been overseas before, and this is 1989 when we were preparing to go. We arrived in January 1990. You remember there was no internet in those days, so in order to
Right.
find out about Samoa, we went to our local municipal library and got out some books, all of which were 20 or 30 years out of date.
Sure.
Um, and we got some tourist brochures from a travel agent, which told us almost nothing. And then we flew off and landed in Samoa. We were pretty naive. We were in our late 20s, so I was 27. And we don't no sooner got there and we got into a house. We were going to be teaching in a secondary school, in a high school. And our employer, which was a church, put us in a house. And then a cyclone came and basically destroyed everything around us. So 2 weeks into our first venture overseas, we were in a foreign country without power, and because of that, we lost our water as well, and we were running out of food. And so the Encounter story is really about recovery from that then, and starting to teach, getting the school up and running again, gradually. I mean, the US Army came, the Australian Army, the New Zealand, the British arrived. They all started rebuilding and setting things up and fixing roads and so on. They were there for quite a while. The US Army was there, I think, for 3 months, along with the Aussies. And so it was the story of getting everything ready again. But the problem was that we were in a completely alien culture. Samoan culture was, to us, seemed pretty bizarre, as well as different language. And so the story is called Encounter, A Journey into Chaos, Culture and Compassion. So the chaos is sort of indicative of the cyclone, and a cyclone is a hurricane in the US, um, and recovering from that. And then the culture is trying to live and work in a completely alien culture, which with different values and you know, making a faux pas was pretty easy. You could insult people very easily. And then compassion was really once we started to engage in the culture and with the students that we had, most of whom were 18-year-old girls, and caring for them and learning to look after them and understand their struggles, some of which were pretty brutal and sometimes violent, was quite a is quite a learning curve for us. Yeah. So we were the equivalent of the US Peace Corps. It would be the short way to explain it. The Australian system is a different system. It's not operated by the Australian government, but it's the basic idea that you volunteer, you go and live and work in local salary on local conditions, and just become part of the people there and live and work there for a number of years, usually two, but sometimes 3 or 5.
I mean, I cannot even imagine what you're saying right now, obviously, but I want to make sure that we lay it out for the folks who are listening. There is, back then, there's no Google Translate. There's no GPS. You know what I mean? These are things that did not
No,
exist. So,
yeah, yeah. No mobile phones,
yeah, right. I,
no
I'm
internet.
I'm wondering. I'm sure everybody else is right now. You don't speak the language, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
And
right.
And so you don't speak the language. You can't find any information on the place because it's, 30-year-old encyclopedias I think we were using back then and,
Yeah,
brochures
that's
like
right.
you said. So you can't even like look things up currently. What in the world makes you say, "Hey, this is what we're going to go do. We're going to go to the middle of some place we've never been, where we have no idea what we're walking into, where we don't speak the language." I mean, that seems incredibly brave to go out there. Is this you were called to go do this, or what makes you say,
Yeah,
"Hey,
I
let's
think
go do
so.
this"?
So as a university student, I was very interested in what was called appropriate technology then, which is technology applied in developing countries with people who, are technically not as advanced, but they want to adopt the benefits of technology. And so the appropriate technology was really a bridging technology between, say, a horse-drawn plough and a tractor, which might be a small motorized device, which is not a tractor, but it's halfway there. So that interested me, and I was interested in aid and development. And both my wife and I were committed Christians. And so we were thinking, is this God, something God would want us to do or leading us to do to go overseas and live and work in a developing country? So we got training from a number of aid organizations, one of whom was World Vision, who
Okay.
you're probably familiar with.
Mhm.
And a friend there advised us to go with this program. It was called Australian Volunteers Abroad then, or now it's called Australian Volunteers International, which was essentially the Australian version of the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps is a government organisation, but this one was funded largely by the government, but as a non-government organisation, an NGO. So they said, it's a great opportunity to get some good experience. And the way that worked is you go there and you're on your own, basically. So the US Peace Corps are always connected to their embassy and they usually have managers full time who look after the volunteers and so on. The trade-off was that they wanted volunteers who had worked for at least 2 years and ideally at least five, so that these are people that are a little bit more mature than a lot of Peace Corps volunteers who are often straight out of college. Um, and then they gave us training, a week of live-in training where all the volunteers going to all over countries around the world went. And they taught us a few things about how to avoid dying of malaria and um, how to not die prematurely.
That was nice of
Um,
them. All right. It's a good place to start.
and they gave us a reverse. They said a reverse charges telephone call back to Australia if we needed help, which was great for us
Oh,
because 2 weeks after we arrived, all the power lines blew down and all the phone lines. So there was no reverse charges
no,
telephone
no way to
call.
do this. Oh my gosh. Um,
Um,
oh my gosh.
But
Okay.
in many ways, being on our own meant that we were pretty much free to do whatever we liked and live the way we wanted to live, and there were no restrictions on us. We did have help from the Australian High Commission, which in Commonwealth countries is the equivalent of an embassy. So there were people there that we could go to, and they might be able to help us. So that was sort of handy.
Okay.
Uh, I tell the story in the cyclone. The first thing we did was like dutiful, Australians, we went into the capital, managed to get there on the back of a truck, and we went straight to the High Commission to tell them that we were okay and so they could alert our families back home that we were all right. And they were closed. Um, we said,
Okay.
we're here to help, but when we go there, the office is closed.
Okay. So you really have no help here. When you're out there, you don't speak the
Yeah,
language, so on. Let's briefly touch on, how do you handle things like not having water, not having food, there's no electricity, I mean, how are you functioning, just as humans
yeah,
in this? Let's touch on that real quick first, because I know there's a lot more to get into after that.
yeah. So the good thing is the Australian volunteers had a rule number one, which was make friends with a Peace Corps volunteer quickly.
Hmm.
First thing you do is so Fortunately, our two neighbours were two young girls from the Midwest, one from Cleveland,
Hmm.
the other from Minnesota, and they were living next door. They sort of befriended us, and they'd been there a year already, so they gave us some pretty good advice. There were local Samoans on the school compound, um, and then there were other people who got stranded with us. A couple of New Zealanders. They were travelling and they got marooned there with us during the cyclone because the road was washed away and they were stuck there, and it was the safest place to be was within a building. Our roofs did stay on and theirs stayed on, partly because they were built by an Australian aid program and they built them to be cyclone proof.
Hmm.
So that turned out to be the case. So our roof stayed on. The wind, within the first 2 hours, the wind blew rain horizontally through our house continuously for 3 days. Um, so, hurricanes in the US, they come in the Caribbean out of the Atlantic. They hit the US mainland and then they dissipate and they disperse within 24 hours. Same in Australia, but not in the Pacific. They just hang around. There's no big landmass to disperse them. So they hang around. Um, so when we eventually emerged, we had no water. Our tank had run dry. There was no power to pump the water to the tank. But there was a spring about 600 meters away, which was a village bathing pool. There were freshwater springs all around Samoa because it rains a lot and the water flows. So the girls knew of this spring and the bathing pool. So we used that for washing, bathing, doing our laundry and so on. It's a public bathing pool. Um, and then we learned how to bathe wrapped in an EA or, I don't know what word you might use, but sarong is another word. It's a piece of cloth, 1 meter by 2 meter roughly, which you wrap around you. And that's common clothing in a lot of these countries. And so you have to learn how to bathe wrapped in one of those. It's quite tricky because you're
Well,
bathing in public where everyone can see you. Um, so we had to learn how to do that. Um, the saving grace, I think, was that I had grown up on a farm and I was an engineer. So I quickly found a couple of water tanks that had blown away from somewhere. I got them I patched them up using some basic engineering skills. And some stuff I bought in a hardware shop before the cyclone, so I had it in hand. Um, and then we put it under the eaves of the house. The house had no guttering, but when it rains in summer or in the wet season, it buckets down. So within a short space of time, we were able to collect some water within the first week and have it in front of our house in a tank.
mhm.
And then we carried it by bucket into the house and we would boil it and treat it. Um, we managed to immediately they started shipping aid in, so we managed to buy a 25 kilogram bag of rice from the back of a truck. You might have seen these things in the news where they show a truck with stacked up with bags of rice and they're dumping it down to people. We paid like the equivalent of US $3 for a 25 kilogram bag of rice. So that we shared that amongst everyone, and that kept us alive for a while. And there were plenty of tins of fish donated as well. So we got tinned herring from Europe. So we're on a tropical island in the Pacific. We're eating tinned herring from Europe, and and bags of rice from Papua New Guinea. Uh,
All right.
and then 2 weeks later, we started to get the school up and running again. We taught a few hours a day. We ran a school in the tropics with 800 students and no water, which I thought was, how can you do that? But it's developing countries, so people are used to hardship. So they came, they went to school, they left without any water.
Wow.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, stuff that we would
So,
not even understand today. Everybody's had a drinking fountain their entire lives.
Yeah, that's
right?
right.
And running water. So,
Um, and gradually they started to. The first thing they do is open the airport. Then they had to fix the wharf to be able to bring ships in because the wharf was all damaged. Eventually they brought ships in, and then they brought, fixed all the roads. They eventually, about 6 weeks later, they got power reconnected. Um, but we were without power for most of the year. So we were cooking on a fire, three rocks and a saucepan or a frying pan on a fire outside.
yeah,
We all got together with our Peace Corps friends, and we all shared and lived together, basically shared each other's houses and kitchens and so on. So we grew very close to those two girls next door to us. Um, they effectively became like family to us, and they stayed that way. Unfortunately, they both died relatively young. Um,
I'm sorry.
so,
Wow.
so we've lost them, unfortunately. But yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
um, and it was interesting. We had had American teachers when we were at high school, and we got a lot of American television. We all the cartoons from Hanna-Barbera and all of those we got. So we were familiar with we got Happy Days and all those shows on our television. So we felt like we were familiar with US sort of pop culture that way. But we weren't really. And we discovered that there was two cultural shifts going on. The first one was trying to understand Samoan culture.
Hmm.
The other one was trying to understand US culture, and they were trying to understand Australian culture. And trying to get around the stereotypes that we had of each other, which we did have. Um,
Interesting.
so we learned a lot, about that, and that's something I describe in the book was a bit of culture shock with American culture as well, and the parallels of trying to understand a very different foreign culture.
Interesting.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
you're doing that, as you're going through that process, what were the hardest things to understand about American culture, and what were the hardest things to kind of come to grips with about the Samoan culture? The most challenging, let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
So I think with American culture is we use the same words, but they can have very different meanings. So I'll give you an example. Something bad would happen, and our American friend neighbor would say, "Oh, that's too bad." And that's sympathetic. You say, "Oh, that's terrible. We offer you sympathy."
Hmm.
Well, in Australian culture, when you say, "Well, that's too bad," that means I don't care. I'm offering you no sympathy whatsoever. It's all your fault. Just too bad. Tough luck.
Interesting.
Suck it up,
Okay.
baby.
So our slang is different. I got you. All right.
Yeah, yeah. And we didn't being Christians, our language wasn't typical vernacular Australian, but then our friends would come and they would talk typical vernacular Australian, which was to our American, Midwest girls, was expletive laced. And
Really? Okay.
they were very shocked. And we discovered things like we'd say, "Oh, damn," and we discovered that in Midwest, conservative America, damn is a bad word, whereas
Right.
we use it all the time.
Gotcha.
And we,
Okay.
and our friend would say, she'd say, "Oh, I sat on my fanny," which, means you're behind your bum.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, fanny in Australia means a very different part of the anatomy, but it's in the same region.
Oh, goodness.
So we'd be shocked. That's not a good thing to say.
I can
So the
see it.
things like that, I think. The other thing that with thing with Samoan culture is, firstly, there were so many reversal things that just were puzzling. Like it was rude to introduce someone in Samoan culture. You don't, you have a friend come along and you meet another Samoan friend. You don't introduce that friend. That's insulting to the person you're introducing them to. That means that you're saying that they haven't done their homework to find out who that person is before they come. Which,
Wow.
in a village context where everyone knows everyone, um, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
It's your duty to know who has come into the village and who they are and to know all about them before you meet them. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, so, along with that, village life, Samoan houses have no walls or windows or doors. Traditionally, they do these days. There are a lot of European houses, but traditionally, you have a roof, a thatched roof, and you let the sea breeze blow through your house all day. And at night, you let the breeze blow back through your house all night, and it keeps you cool. So they're very cool, pleasant, places, but they have no walls, which means that there's very little privacy. Your neighbours see what's going on in your house all the time. You see what's going on in their houses. And there's a code of conduct. But it means that for our students, for example, as teenagers, they were growing up in a village situation where everyone knew everything about them, their family, their brothers and sisters, their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, their parents. So if you think of it as a teenager, all your faux pas and mistakes and things you did as a kid, everyone remembers them and they use them as leverage
Uh,
later on. So that lack of privacy for a teenager could be very difficult, and the teenage suicide rate in Samoa was very high.
oh, wow.
Um, we had a number of students of ours commit suicide during our 2 years there. We had even more attempt it, and then after we left in the following year, a number of students committed suicide the following year, which
Wow.
we were told about from friends. Yeah. So that was very confronting. Um, and they did it in different ways. Sometimes they hung themselves off a tree. Sometimes they blew their brains out with a shotgun or rifle. But the favoured method was to drink weed killer, paraquat. It
Oh,
gives you a very slow and agonising death. But while you're dying, everyone sits around your bed, and for one brief moment, you know you're loved.
oh my goodness.
Mm.
So, I mean, it sounds like there was a mental health um, sort of phenomenon going on there.
Yeah, there was all sorts of things. And, the Samoans themselves struggled to understand it all. You could explain it in those sort of terms. Um, but, I mean, the first attempted suicide we dealt with was explained as unrequited love from a girlfriend. Well, I guess, that's an explanation. I still don't think that was the only explanation. I think
Sure.
there was something more deeply rooted than that. But
Right.
yeah. But
I
that
mean,
that happened a lot. So there are a lot of confronting things like that. There was a lot of violence, violence within the school. So teachers would hit students pretty hard and pretty violently. Um, they misbehave. They'd punch them, slap them hard. In another school, the principal beat a kid so badly, a teenage boy, that he broke his arm
in a school.
in
Okay.
school. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's just so the expectations, the rules of society are just completely,
Yeah.
different, obviously. When
Mind you, their discipline was very effective.
Wow, imagine. There's probably
It
people who
was
are going to
short,
hear this.
swift, and effective.
People are going to hear this and go, "We need to start doing that in American schools. Get these kids back in line." I can just hear these guys now, saying those things. Um, when you went over
Yeah.
there to work with the school to go over there, experience the culture and so on, what was your for you and your wife? What was your goal in going over there?
Yeah. So I think part of it was to see, get some experience and say, is this something that we are prepared to do and that God wants us to do going forward. So that was the first thing. The other one was that we live in an immigrant society here, just like the US. You know, Melbourne is probably one of the most multicultural cities in the world. And so my wife in particular had spent a lot of time teaching teenagers who had come out of the Vietnam War and the Cambodian
Mm.
Holocaust, if you like,
Right.
under Pol Pot. They arrived as refugees, and so she spent a lot of time teaching those kids and visiting their parents and being with them, hearing the parents' stories, sometimes very harrowing stories, and so on. And so, we wanted to be able to experience a different culture and we wanted to learn a different language. We didn't care where it was. We just wanted to have the experience of, I want to be able to learn to speak a different language and understand a different culture and live in it, and try to adopt it and see what we learned out of that. Um, so in that sense, that's a typical motivation for a lot of Peace Corps volunteers as well. It's a bit of adventure,
Hmm.
but it's also I want to experience the world not as a tourist. I want to experience it as an experience of what's it like to really live like a Samoan person in their society. We could have gone anywhere. Another candidate country was Botswana. We would have gone there too. We did say not Cambodia because at the time they were still fighting a civil war with the Khmer Rouge,
Mm.
pretty active,
Yeah.
um, and some volunteers did lose their lives there. Um, so we sort of excluded that.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, that was the motivation,
That was it.
and we did seriously think about going again, except later on, a few years later, after we had children, my wife was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that was a pretty severe, problem to have in a developing country. It's pretty difficult
I can't
to
imagine.
live
Yeah.
live with that. Yeah, and
Sure.
dangerous. Yeah,
So you wanted, obviously, you wanted to sort of enrich yourselves, learn these things, and people can buy the book. We definitely want them to buy the book, so we don't want to tell the whole story, of everything that
yeah,
happened to you
yeah.
over there, because we don't want to give away the secret sauce of the book here. I am curious, as you live through this, as you've gone through all that, you've handled all this adversity, you've embraced all these different cultural changes and phenomenon, and seen what you've seen. How does that then impact you later when you come back, when you go, when you come back to sort of normal life, as
Yeah.
we might say, right? How does that experience impact you moving forward?
So I think there are two sort of experiences really. One is the short term is that, after 2 years, we had got to the point where a lot of the Samoan curiosities we had adopted and thought, no, these make sense. And we were starting to look at our own culture as being a little bit weird.
Hmm.
Why do we do things like this?
Okay.
Um, and so when you come back, you do the reverse culture shock, which can be a bit harder because you're going back in your own country and then people say, you know, you've changed, but nothing else has changed. So that's hard. I think coming back for me, longer term, I learned a lot really quickly. And the book Encounter just covers the first few months, and people are amazed. And they say, I don't know how you managed to do all those or experience all those things in the first 3 months, but we did. But it went on and on and on. It just, you know, we just kept learning new things.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned was different styles of leadership, which is pretty strong in Samoa. And they have the idea of you learn leadership by service. You learn to serve first, and through serving, you learn to lead. And that's a servant model of leadership that they have. It's also a command and control model. But our Western culture has often admired or just seen command and control as the strong leader who tells you, well, do this, do that. much more of a military mindset.
Hmm.
But I saw that model there, but I also saw a servant model, a model where you facilitate people to make decisions by consensus, and we make decisions together, and then we all own that decision. And I put that into practice as a team leader and a project leader in a company a few years later that was doing, the complete opposite end of the spectrum. We were doing high tech development. We were going into a university like Duke or Cambridge and picking up some latest technology and then building a product around that to meet a human need somewhere. So it could be a diagnostic product, or it could be a new machine for Coca-Cola or something like that. But it was new tech, high tech. And the thing I found is that within those industries, the command and control model was very strong, and the expectation was that I should do that. But I used what I'd learned for dealing with, people at a very simple technological level and bring them on the journey. And I applied that with my clients and also with my team. Some of the team were unhappy with that. They wanted to be told what to do and to go and do it. And so I had to actually move people off the team who weren't willing to do it. But the benefit was that when things went bad, they weren't looking to me, they would look to themselves to solve the problems. And it meant that everyone, when you make a decision by consensus, everyone is aware of why we made the decision. And when things start to go wrong, they don't need to look to the leader. They can manage it themselves. They know what everyone else is doing. They know how the whole system works together. And I saw that model in Japan. They often work by consensus. Um,
Wow.
they take it, I think, to rather an extreme, some companies, but they work with the team must decide, and that model was embedded in their adoption of their quality system, which was actually a US model, developed model, um, came out of the US.
I can't imagine
Uh,
that in
we,
the US.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was rejected by the flagship companies in the US, so the guy took it to Toyota and Mitsubishi and other companies in Japan in the 1950s, who said, "Oh, we've got a quality problem. We really got to improve our quality," and they adopted this model. So I applied the same thing, but I applied it to the design end, design and development rather than the manufacturing. And yeah, it was very successful. I had a lot of success as a project leader doing that. The first time they told me I was lucky because they said, this shouldn't work. The
Okay.
second time they told me I was very lucky because now it had worked twice.
Right.
And by the third time they said, I think you need to start training our people.
Uh, proof of concept right there. All right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. It
But
takes that
from
though.
what I
Yeah.
know of Elon Musk and the way he operates,
Hmm.
and the way he's worked in Tesla. So I have some insight into Tesla because one of my manufacturing engineers worked for Tesla. Um, they've adopted a lot of those same principles, and a lot of those have been impregnated into Silicon Valley startups as well,
I see.
where you do things as a team. You have a strong leader there to guide and facilitate, but you make decisions as a team, and decentralizing that decision making, empowering people within your team to work and make decisions and take decisions that, empowering them to be wrong. And that was what I empowered my team to do,
Wow.
make mistakes, but when if you make a mistake, we as a team own it. We don't single out scapegoats. Um, so putting that into practice was pretty powerful and enabled me to achieve a lot of ongoing, consistent success with projects.
Nice.
Mm. And that translated into, delivering projects under budget or on time.
I mean, I can't imagine the culture shift that would have to take place in most American companies to be able to accept that sort of change in their leadership models. I mean, that's staggering to think.
Yeah, but it is there. And I met
Yeah.
other US companies that operated in a very similar model.
Wow.
And a lot of US companies have since adopted the Japanese quality
Mm,
model. They
okay.
started doing that in the 1980s once they saw that Toyota was producing better quality cars than GM.
Sure.
And American consumers started buying more Toyotas, and GM got into trouble, and Chrysler got into trouble, and Ford got into trouble, and
Yeah,
then they
I
started
remember
to
those
send teams
bailouts way
across to
back when.
Japan to say, "Oh, what are we doing wrong here?"
Right.
So I think, at the team level of the people I worked with at Coca-Cola, they pretty much they didn't do it to the extreme that I did, but they did operate a lot that way.
Okay.
And some of the other American companies I worked with, in the high tech industry, where you're trying to solve impossible problems, people think that you can't do, and they're trying to solve that problem. Um, Harnessing the team to do that is the best way to really move forward. Command and control works really well in emergency services. When the ambulance turns up, you don't want to have a conference about
Right.
what's the best way to do.
Yeah, there's
The
no
fire
time to have a
brigade, you
chat.
don't
Right.
want to you don't want to say, "Hey, guys, let's get together and work out what we think we should do here."
Right.
It doesn't translate. It doesn't work that way.
Sure.
Um, and so when we face disasters and so on, we will revert back to command and control. You
Gotcha.
do this, you do that.
Right.
You know.
As you,
Um,
as you, especially with the Samoan culture and the changes that you experienced, the differences in culture. I mean, from no walls to no privacy to suicide issues. I mean, all the things you described. I'm curious with what we talk about on the show a lot, and with the listeners that I have here. There are roles that we look at that are sort of inherent in being a father, in being a husband, things of that
yeah,
nature. I'm very curious as to how all of this exposure to all of these different cultures and thought processes and belief systems, how that impacted you in terms of how you saw your role moving forward as a father and as a husband.
yeah. I think so. Certainly, with being a father, I we have two girls. They're both grown up and married now.
Congratulations.
Um, both both out in the workforce doing work, which is great to see them. Being responsible and adults.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think the biggest learning that I had, I think, was came from um, we had a trial run in Samoa in that we informally adopted a teenage girl. We had some girls come and live with us in our home.
Hmm.
It's not covered in Encounter, but it will be in the subsequent book. We didn't realize that in Samoa that means they become your actual daughter
Oh, wow.
in their eyes. So, so I had the experience of being a father to a teenage girl, um, with all of the same sort of issues of, going out with a boyfriend and studying at school and all of those things. She's still our Samoan daughter. She lives in Melbourne now. She eventually immigrated with her husband to Australia. Um, so that gave me a bit of a taste of what it's like to be a father of a daughter.
Hmm.
But our first daughter was, to put it mildly, was when she came home from the hospital. She was she broke all the rules. She didn't do what she was supposed to do. She wanted to sleep all day and then stay awake and scream all night. And she was very determined little baby girl. We didn't know what had hit us. Um, and you know, when you're sleep deprived and still got to go to work each day and you've got to try and do that, and it was she was very difficult. And um, she turned into a little girl who was very bright academically. She was very smart, a very sharp mind, but also very clear on what she was prepared to do and what she wasn't prepared to do,
Hmm.
and what she wanted. And as a father, we ended up, I had to be pretty hard on her sometimes. Like at one stage when she was 7, she refused to go to school. She refused to get out of bed. She refused to get dressed. She refused to have breakfast. Um, and we listened to child psychologists and other parents who said, "Oh, we do this or we do that or do that." She wasn't having a bar of anything they offered. Um, so we ended up working with the school quite closely, but I would pick her up in her pajamas, carry her out to the car, put her in the car, drive to the school, carry her out of the car into the school in her pajamas with her school uniform. Um, because of that level in Melbourne, most schools have a uniform. And then I would hand her over to the school nurse, who would take her and eventually get her to class.
Okay.
It's pretty hard to do that as a father and then go off to work and and function as a project leader and lead people.
I imagine.
Um, but I think you know the crowning learning from that was that it's very easy if you've got children who are really obedient and do what they're told and seem to cruise through. It's very easy to think that, well, that's because I'm a great parent. And then, you look at other people and you think, well, they don't look control their children. They're doing this or they're doing that, or they're noisy or they're out of control or they're this or that. I learned that by the grace of God, God gives you the child that needs you as a parent. And someone wiser than us told us that, and it was a struggle to believe that, but I do believe it.
Hmm.
Um, this is the child for you. This child needs you as a parent. Is a good way to think about it.
Nice.
And by the time she became a teenager, her sort of, I know what I want and believe and think,
Yeah.
um, turned out to be a very, really strong trait because she wasn't swayed by peer group pressure in the way that her friends were.
Okay.
She was, she's clear on, what her principles were, and she stuck to them. So in the end, our her the parents of her friends relied on her to look after them when they went out together because they knew that Rosemary wouldn't get drunk and do
Nice.
she wouldn't do anything dangerous. She would look after their daughters.
Well, that's a feather
Um,
in your cap for sure. Right there.
yeah,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
Uh,
Our second daughter was much more, you know, how can I say it? Much more even keeled, I guess.
mhm.
Um, yeah, the older daughter did better academically at school. The younger daughter has become an artist, and she's trying to make her way doing art therapy for people with disabilities. So she's a different type of person
Sure.
altogether. And I think that, you know, that was humbling as a parent to realize, okay, God, God has given you these children, but how they turn out like, and what they do, um, you do your best as a parent,
Sure.
but you can't control them. You can't control children. You can guide them.
You got him,
You can,
right?
give them the best opportunities. You can support them. You can teach them good principles and you can lead by good examples and so on. But at the end of the day, you can't control them.
I love that
Yeah.
observation. I really do. I know there's a lot of men right now who are going, yeah, I hear you. Got it. Makes sense. I love
I,
that.
I, I just went to the other day, went to the funeral of a father of a friend I went to university with. And Sharon, when I was at university, she studied law and she became a university lecturer at one of the leading universities here. She did everything right. You know, she was a good daughter. She studied hard. She helped people. She was always obedient, strong,
Hmm.
principled. Her brother, younger brother, from, you know, very young, didn't want to go to church, didn't, was into all sorts of things.
Hmm.
And as soon as he got old enough, he wanted a panel van, a car. He got when he was 18, and um, and then he got a girlfriend. Then he got her pregnant. So he was 18, pregnant girlfriend.
Yeah, you can't control how they turn out. For
The
sure.
odd thing, the interesting thing is that 10 years later, he was a Baptist minister.
Well,
And I met him recently
wow.
after first time after 40 years, and now he's got grey hair and he's got, um, I think, three kids of their own. They've adopted another three from overseas.
Wow.
Um, they run a number of charities. Um, they're, very giving, fine people. Um, and it just goes showing, I think some people they have to go through a learning experience to understand the value of something. You have
Right.
to lose it for a while first before you realize actually all that was pretty valuable. Yeah.
God is
But you need
always
to
at work
stick
in
with your
somebody's
kids.
life, right?
Yeah.
So,
You need to stick with your kids, you know.
yeah,
Don't abandon them, support them, and love
for
them
sure.
just the same no matter what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I do have, one more question for you before we hit that, just as we kind of wrap things up here. How can people reach you, find the book, reach out, that type of thing? What kind of contact information do you want to put out there? I'll make sure it's all in the show notes.
Yeah. So I think certainly for US listeners, but other people in Europe or UK or wherever else in the English speaking world, the easiest place to go is Amazon
Hmm.
or in the US, Barnes and Noble. I mean, we use Barnes and Noble here as well in Australia. They ship
Hmm.
here. Um, so look up Encounter by Ian Reilly, um, and I will post a link through to you to be able to do that straight to Amazon or Barnes and Noble in the US.
Perfect.
Um, yeah, I know my people in the US are telling me that they have ordered the book and it's been delivered and they're enjoying it. So it took a
Beautiful.
little bit of while to get the wheels of Amazon turning, but they got there.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I'll make sure that that link is in the show notes for everybody. So, as we kind of close up here, Ian, thank you for your time and for the story. And folks, you got to go check out this book. I have 1,000 more questions. I could probably talk to this guy for another hour. But in the interest of your time, we're going to wrap it up here. Ian, let me just ask you, is there anything that I didn't ask you? Is there anything that we talked about, you want to double down on, or maybe just a parting thought for folks as we, wrap things up? I'm going to let you have the floor for a minute, and you can end however you'd like.
Yeah, okay. I think one of the other key things in the book that I explore is meaning and purpose in your life. And Um, for us, going to Samoa gave us meaning and purpose. We went there and our purpose was very clear. At least we thought it was when we got there,
Hmm.
you know. And then we were surrounded by needs and we worked to try and fulfill those needs because we could, with a bit more time and a bit more hard work and working to midnight by candlelight, we can do that. Um, And then after a while, we realized that it doesn't matter how hard we worked, it was really hard to accomplish anything. And you really start to wonder, why am I here? What is this worth? Why is it worth while doing this, we don't seem to be able to make a change. Like change is really, really hard. Um, it seems to take so much effort, and whenever you do make a change, it just evaporates really quickly if you're not there to maintain it and support it and everything else. Whether that's, behavioral change or just making something work, making a machine work in a developing country that can be pretty hard sometimes. So I just want to, encourage people out there. I think it's a good question to ask, and it's a good place to get to say, and probably a lot of men, sometimes you're working in a job and you wonder what am I going to get up for in the morning? What's it going to be worthwhile? Am I really doing anything? My job just doesn't sound, it's not groundbreaking. There's no great thing I'm doing. I'm just a teacher, or I'm just a mechanic, or I'm just this, or I'm just that. Um, so I think for us, our purpose was anchored in our understanding of who we are before God, and that God has a purpose for our lives. And I encourage you to seek that purpose. Um, and that can be in something you do, value what you do. Because being a mechanic and fixing people's cars is a really important contribution to making, things run. That car is used by a mum who takes her kids to school, you know. That's really valuable thing to do. If you're cleaning streets, that is really important to do, because when you live in a country like Samoa where they don't clean streets, where they don't fix the footpaths, you really notice it. It results in real harm and sometimes death when you don't clean the street and you don't look after things.
Wow.
So value the work that you do, even if it may be mundane, and do it well. And that was one of the things I learned from the Japanese. They try and do everything well, do it, and doing it well, and taking pride in what you do, even if it is something that lots of other people can do. You can do it with pride and you can do it well, and with meaning and purpose to what you do. It makes a huge difference to getting up every day, to finishing your work each day and saying, well, I did something good today. I made a difference.
Nice. Nice. What a great wrap up and close out. I mean, that really was. I appreciate that very much, brother. Folks, author of Encounter, Ian Reilly. Ian, thank you for being on today, for sharing your story, telling everybody about your book. And, I'm sure that folks here are going to use that link, pick it up. And I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been great to talk and great to share.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
Folks, this has been another fantastic episode of the Power of Man podcast. And the reason that we bring on such powerful men with such powerful messages is because we are united in, trying to help you regain your power. And so that you can be a better protector, a better provider, better leader tomorrow than you are today. So that you can be a better father, a better husband, a better man tomorrow than you are today. And the reason that we want that for you is because you matter. It's because you have value. It's because you're worth it. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.